Tonight, Colorado's #1 late-night talk television show, it's Jann Scott Live. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jann Scott. Welcome to the big program tonight. Jann Scott Live is the name of the show. In a little bit, we're going to talk with Peter Coyote, the taxi cab philosopher, and then we are also going to talk with James Markuson. He's an economics professor at CU. We're going to talk about Mexico and NAFTA and President Fox and what happened today. And we have a new international affairs producer who's also going to be with us, Margarette Bohannon tonight. But first, you heard it here first, the vote on the CU regents. The CU regents voted they voted on the gay, lesbian, transsexual, NAMBLA, that's the National Association of Men and Boy Lovers or whatever, that whole group, they, here it is, it's, yeah, NAMBLA, National North American Man-Boy Love Association, Child Partners, Cross-Dressers, Drag Queens, Bi Men, Gay Women. There was a vote today whether these people should get, health benefits at CU. Should they get them? Well, they voted. There was a 4-4 vote with Maureen Diaz, whatever her name is, the chairman of the Regents, dissenting. So the vote came out, and the vote was no. No health care for gays. Let's see, I have to get this straight because they have a gigantic list now. They are, and I presume, correct me if I'm wrong, incidentally, 4403572. It is homosexual men, homosexual women, and I don't quite know. Then there are lesbians. I don't know what's the difference between a lesbian and a homosexual woman. Then there are gay, now I have to get this straight. There are gay men, right? But there are not gay women. There are only lesbian women. Okay, and then there are bi men and bi women. And then there are transsexuals, or better known as transgendered people. Okay. And then there are drag queens, okay? And then, but not included in this group were heterosexual cross-dressers. And I don't know why they were left out. And nor do I know why the North American Man-Boy Love Association with child partners was left out. I mean, they should, well, whatever. Anyways, they voted it down. Good. Also, Dance Safe, they're back in the news. These are the people, I love these people. Dance Safe goes to Raves. They go to Raves, and then they set up a little table and a counter, and they test drugs, and they say, okay, kids, this is a good drug, take this. And then the kids take the drugs, they stay up all night, and then they go home and drink 16 gallons of water and kill themselves. But fortunately, we have Dance Safe out there protecting our children. Don't you feel safe with them? No. I think that they're just more drug dealers, more drug pushers out pushing. Anyways, they are in the news. And there's a bunch of studies that came out this week, printed on the front page of USA Today, about club drugs, more club drugs being taken than ever. The DEA, who I know the left and the communists, and the drug dealers, they always hate when they come out with studies. DEA chief says teens ignoring ecstasy risks. So, anyways, you heard it here first. You'll read about it tomorrow. Amy Bounds, she has a big story coming out tomorrow morning in the Daily Cramya, a camera rather, about the Regents voting no Okay, it was a split vote 4-4, but the chairman declined to vote, which is essentially saying no, because it didn't pass, so it's a dead issue now. So that's it. No health benefits for, let's see, do I have it right? NAMBLA with child partners, cross-dressers, drag queens, bi men, bi women, lesbians, gay men. There are no such things as gay women and homosexuals. All right. You know, I have a joke for you. Why do gay men go like this? Because to go like this would be too much. All right. I learned that when I worked on the Lambda Report, which was a gay, lesbian, transgendered NAMBLA. Oh no, they hated NAMBLA actually. Television show. They produced my TV show there in Denver, and we produced theirs here. And some of my best friends are homosexual. They are. Like Shane. Hi Shane, how you doing? All right. Okay. I'm trying to keep it all above board here. Peter Coyote joins us. He's the Philosopher taxi driver. Been on the show before. Famous guy here. Boulder. Hey Peter, how are you?
Doing good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm great. You're not the other Peter Coyote that people
No. Don't confuse me with the actor. He's much younger than me and probably a lot more handsome, you know. So besides that, I'm officially titled, Grandpa Peter Coyote or Grandfather Peter Coyote. And my coyote is with a K, so there's our distinction.
Well, you spell coyote with a K? Mm-hmm. Not tonight. We've changed it.
Oh, okay. Well.
So you're driving a cab now and doing readings and general philosophy in the taxi
I've really been kind of laying low in the taxi business, just meeting a lot of interesting people and working my butt off. Mm-hmm. Still do a few readings and healings here and there, mm-hmm. but mainly just letting people know I'm still around and staying visible while I get my own little wagon rolling again, and you know. Now
you had to talk. You worked with one of our producers a few years ago, Jeanette Schutz, and then she discovered you and she got you a radio show down in Denver and K-How, right, where you were on weekends doing.
No, 5 nights a week on K-Talk.
5 nights a week on K-Talk, really?
AM 760.
What the heck were you doing there?
I had a live call-in show at midnight. They only gave me an hour.
And what'd you do?
Basically, I would first give a little story about what was currently happening. You know, just basically a vision. Sometimes they'd be dreams. Sometimes there'd be contact with so-called aliens, etc. And after I got through that segment of it, we'd start taking calls, and people would call in, and I would give them the recipe of their life in a mystical sense. And while we were doing that, we were conveying energy on the channel. And a lot of people's lives were touched.
Really?
You know?
Well, you've touched my life. Every time I'm around you, things get better. Yeah. It's true.
I can't take any claim for that, but I've heard this story before.
I used to communicate with aliens myself, but that was back when I was taking a lot of drugs and I was in detox coming out of the hospital, and I realized today it's probably heavily delusional.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, once when I was on KNUS, with this guy called in, he was communicating with UFOs. He said he was in a UFO. I tried to get him to fly it around the Tabor Center, but they just couldn't seem to get it.
Well, common sense tells us, because so many reasonable people have seen evidence of this, and I had actual experience with them, that common sense tells us. I mean, you look in the sky, and the vastness of the universe, and we're the only pin drop of life there. I mean, come on.
If the Lord created it that way, this is our playland out there to discover for centuries to come.
But maybe a lot of people have seen it. But when I say aliens, I use it in quotes, because I don't see any form of life as alien. Mm-hmm. You know, I think we're all created of one love, basically. You know.
So what has been going on? What kind of reading? I mean, can you do a reading on me tonight? How am I doing?
You. Oh, brother.
Okay. Can we tell it to be? Everybody's silent, no talking. Peter's going to do a reading.
Well, that's no biggie.
Okay, good.
I do these all the time.
Oh, dear, okay.
See, we're each an open book.
Yeah.
Each of us wears our story. Mm-hmm. I'm only gifted enough to see bits and pieces.
Right.
But the normal state for humanity is to know everything about each person you meet, because you're so in love with that person and you can allow anything to be there. Mm-hmm. That's essentially how we are. But what we hold here inside of ourselves is a specter, a little tiny piece of light that is a life, and it's an experience, and the fullness of our, say, energetic being, spiritual being, is projecting that specter. But you're a coyote in your own right. Mostly the joke's on yourself, just like it always is on me. I'll tell you, us coyotes are very professional at pulling the joke on ourselves.
Right.
We love those kind of expressions. You're in a kind of static state right now, yet tremendous movement is occurring. You're restless. There's sometimes the feeling of the threat of imminent heart failure, but not in the sense that you would have, that you would have a heart attack, but in another sense, in the sense that you can't love yourself enough, in the sense that there's not enough peace there yet. So tonight, you know, we're going to give you that essential peace. Just touch you. Can I touch you on the floor? Would you permit that?
Touch me any place at all.
All right. Yeah, and just convey a little of the source. I'm kind of like spiritual jumper cables, you know, and I really don't have to say much. There's just an energy that flows from me to you and from you to me. It's an exchange. Well, not an exchange, it's a circle. But it's a way, because I share a certain state of consciousness in myself, then energetically that's shared with you, and so it allows you then to catch up with yourself, to see then who you really are, and therefore act more normally within that person. In other words, with the flow of the universal heart that's at the center of us all.
Think I should see a cardiologist?
We're all, no, not at all. Absolutely not. I think your physical heart is in perfect health now. I think your spiritual heart, which is at the center of everything, is feeling like it's about time it realized its ascendant soul, to know itself, in other words. In other words, to let this little specter that we have become the reality that we are, to pull that into us. We're a magnet. You know, because we already have that consciousness, you see. So for you, then, to put this down into earth terms, this means the prescription for you for about, the next 3 weeks or so is a lot of quiet time to yourself, as much as you can spare. And I know you don't have a lot, but a lot of that contacts that you may not have anticipated before from beings that are not so far beyond you. And you'll see this. You start, you know, it changes your whole perspective when you begin to experience it, when it becomes a reality and not just somebody else's myth that you got to believe in. It changes your whole perspective. That's the steps, you're right on the threshold of all of that. In fact, you've got a lot of it already, but it's like solidifying.
I need to talk to my guardian angel more. I talk to God and I talk pretty regularly, but I don't talk to my angels so much.
Well, their form of communication, this is why people so misunderstand angels. Their form of communication is here. And you don't, you will hear voices at times, but mostly you just know. I mean, if you're awake enough in this center part, there's the third eye inside, of course, and you'll see, like your guardian is always right about here in terms of what you can see from inside of yourself.
Shall we do a reading for some callers?
Sure.
440-3572, the talk line, if you want to have Peter Coyote do a reading for you tonight.
But we're not quite finished with yours. So,
oh, God, okay.
So down to earth terms with you here. Yeah. It's like the next 3 weeks, as much quiet time as you can spare. But also, just being open to new forms of experience, to allow yourself to go where you've never gone before. And this does not mean taking extreme chances. It means seeing that there's an opportunity in certain experiences. And I can't describe exactly what they are, but I know they're kind of contrary to what you think now.
440-3572 for Peter Coyote. Put the phone number up.
It's a way of you to essentially test your assumptions in life and come to see that. It's like shedding the wool and getting the winter coat now, you know? It's kind of like that. So that's what the other side of the next 3 weeks is. You'll have a lot of personal experience where your ideas and concepts and beliefs and normal behaviors will be tested to the max, in a sense, but in another sense, it's very soft.
Don't
very
say
soft.
That. Good. Soft is better. I just.
But tested. I mean, every parameter that you have, and to many people, I think, in the same state of consciousness that you are, same types of experience.
I'm an ascended being, you know. I'm an enlightened.
Of course.
You know.
Of course.
I'm sort of a jokester too, but.
Absolutely, but you know, you try to make it a wry satire because it's a subtle way of hiding the truth and revealing it at the same time.
Yeah.
I use these vehicles myself.
Here we go. Let's go to the phones. Eddie, you're on the air with Jann Scott and Peter Coyote, the taxi cab philosopher.
How's it going?
Good. You want a reading?
Sure.
So what's your name?
Eddie.
Eddie. Eddie, you've been kind of out there for a while, man, and but dreaming of a new experience for yourself, kind of a, well, at the base of it is the desire for the moment of divine expression. There's kind of a sense of excitement in you because you know it's coming. You felt it. And here today you've like received something already just by the fact that you've called in that'll magnify the opportunity for that experience for you. It is something you've held in your heart as a wish, a desire, but you've hidden it from just about everybody. You might have talked about it a little bit here just lately with a friend. But for the most part, it's a very secretive thing, and even you didn't know exactly what it was. You could just talk around it. But here it is now coming like to the surface, so to speak, and that experience now comes to you. It's also the matter of releasing yourself from the guilt of a previous lifetime where there seemed to be a life taken unnecessarily, or something along those lines of someone very dear to you, but in a moment of heated anger. And it doesn't really matter that you remember this experience, just the fact that you know you have an undue amount of guilt, and you've learned to manage it and move beyond it. But it just seems like you have carried a little larger load than other folks. If you just understand that that is an energy you brought to this life with you that you didn't, quote, quote, have time to finish when you were in between life. You brought it here to process. Actually, that's something you've carried with you since the beginning of time, but that's another story. This is finish time then for you in that sense. And there's another question you got to ask yourself. Is she really worth it?
Is he hitting it? Eddie, is he hitting it right on?
Pretty much.
All right.
That's pretty good.
All right. Thanks, Eddie.
Well, I have one more question.
Well, we have to go, though, but I was going to say to you good night and God bless you.
All right. Thank you. God bless yourself.
Peace, peace.
Peace.
You have a new show coming out on which network?
Well, we have a pilot we're creating now for the Wisdom Channel. We'll see where it goes from there, you know, the Coyote Rock and Roll Medicine Show.
And if people want to contact you, how do they reach you?
I've got a little bulletin board answering service at, what is that, 303-415-2755. I also have a website at
what's the website? Yeah.
www.geocities.com/Peter Coyote, and the Coyote's K-O-Y-O-T-E. So that's, and then you also see me on the streets in Boulder.
Yeah.
Come catch me in my taxi cab. I hang out at Cafe Soleil. That's my...
If somebody wants a cab, do you have a cell phone they can call you at?
720-290-2902. That's an easy one to remember.
Say it one more time.
720-290-2902. But remember, I'm a busy guy, so, you know.
Just for cabs only, go to the website if you want to contact Peter Coyote for readings. He's the real deal. Coming up next, we're going to talk with Professor James Markusen. He's a CU economics professor. Also, Margarette Bohannon is going to join us. But first, President Fox from Mexico was on MSNBC today, and he met with President Bush. He also spoke before a joint session of Congress and the Senate, and here's what he had to say.
Bring back in our guests for just a moment, Frank Del Olmo and Raul Izagui. Very quickly, Frank, what would you expect to hear from President Fox, and what would the tone be?
I think his tone is going to be very conciliatory, very asking for trust. He's been emphasizing that word a lot, saying that for the U.S. and Mexico to really cooperate and move forward on things like the war against drugs, not just on immigration, that's clearly his most important topic, but on things like increased trade, and especially the war against drugs. There needs to be more trust between the U.S. and Mexico to overcome a history of mutual concern on both sides. Americans fearing, wondering about corruption in Mexico, Mexicans fearing their very powerful northern neighbor.
Raul,
I've got a text of the speech here, and that's pretty much you'll hear the word trust an awful lot all through the course of the speech.
Raul, it's Greg Jarrett. I want to ask you what you're expecting, especially since the president said, and I'm quoting here President Bush, I've explained to President Fox there's no appetite for blanket amnesty in Congress. So what do you expect here?
I expect that he will be emphasizing the bilateral nature of these problems, that he'll be talking about partnerships. He'll talk about, whether it's in the speech or in other comments that he's been making to the American administration, he'll be stressing that you can't solve drug problems with simply interdiction at the border, that you have to have bilateral cooperation, that immigration is a bilateral issue, trade is a bilateral issue, that all these things, you need cooperation and partnership in order to solve these very, very difficult problems.
Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, introducing President Vicente Fox, and there'll be another round of applause. It's a bit similar to the way things are done when there's a State of the Union address before a joint session of Congress. This is actually technically called a joint meeting, not a joint session. Joint meetings are for heads of states of other countries. We understand he is going to be speaking in Spanish. Is that right, Chris? Okay, English and Spanish. So we'll listen in, and also going to be joined here in our studio by MSNBC anchor Rick Sanchez, who may help us out a little bit here as well. Vicente Fox, President of Mexico, speaking before Congress.
Muchas gracias. And I'm sure this applause and this warm welcoming is being heard by 100 million Mexicans, which, on the name of them, I thank all of you for being so kind with us in Mexico. Honorables miembros del Congreso de los Estados Unidos de América.
Honorable members of the Congress of the United States of America.
Tengo el alto honor de reunirme con ustedes en esta, la más antigua Asamblea Legislativa del continente americano, cuyas deliberaciones tanta influencia han ejercido en la historia, no solo de este país, sino del mundo entero.
It is a distinct honor for me to meet you here in the oldest legislative assembly on the American continent, a Congress whose deliberations have had such a strong influence not only on the history of this country, but of the entire world.
Este momento histórico entre nuestras naciones, en que los gobiernos de México y los Estados Unidos hemos resuelto iniciar una nueva era de amistad y cooperación en beneficio de nuestros pueblos.
This is an historic moment between our two nations, in which the governments of Mexico and the United States have decided to begin a new era of friendship and cooperation to benefit both our peoples.
México y Estados Unidos deseamos conciliar nuestros principios e intereses, así como nuestras tradiciones y aspiraciones. El encuentro entre nuestros países en este amanecer de un nuevo siglo puede significar el comienzo de los más prometedores episodios de nuestra historia común.
Well, of course, that was in Spanish. We have no idea what he just said, but that was President Fox from Mexico meeting with, speaking before the joint session of Congress. Joining us now, Jim Markusen, Professor of Economics from CU. Thank you so much for coming by and visiting with us tonight. Can you turn down those speakers, because I can hear all of that. It's kind of annoying. What do you think about what Fox just said? I mean, you heard a little bit of it, and you obviously speak Spanish, huh?
I got about 2/3 of that. So we didn't get to hear the whole thing. That was pretty much the niceties, the preliminaries, the diplomatic talk, and getting into the substance of the thing. I think most of the serious discussions were certainly behind closed doors and in a more informal, private atmosphere.
You know, hey, Shandon, Could you turn all these speakers off because it's annoying? I can't concentrate on what the guests are saying by hearing all that background noise. Thanks. You know, so let's talk about you also. You're a professor of economics at CU. You worked in Mexico. You worked on NAFTA. Can you just talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I teach economics, but international trade is my specialty. First, I worked actually on the U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement, which was very interesting. I worked with the Canadians at that time as an advisor to them in preliminary research at a point where it really hadn't been decided to seek a free trade agreement. At the end of it all, they did, and it was, I think, very successful for Canada. And then in the early 90s, I started working a bit with some groups in Mexico doing research, background research for NAFTA. They pretty much felt it was a good idea. The question was, what would the effects be? How should they approach it? What would the negotiating points be with the Americans, with American business, with American labor unions? I was very impressed with them. They were very thorough. They were very careful. They knew their economics. Some of the top people in the Mexican government at the time were trained economists or people in business who had a good sense not only of economics and politics. It was a very interesting experience.
I met with the owner of Cancun Family Mexican Restaurant, who's from Mexico, and we were talking about NAFTA, and he said NAFTA is really good for Mexico because what it did is it gave money and financing to Mexican companies, gave jobs to Mexican people so that they could produce product, he said, but most importantly, send that product, such as leather coats, which is one example he gave, to send those to the United States and sell them here, and then the money kind of goes back to Mexico. And he said what it did was it boosted the economy. But on the other hand, you know, I listen to and read about the WTO protesters, the people who hate NAFTA, and they're always talking about America and corporations are destroying Mexico. There are more people starving in Mexico than ever before. The imperialist American government and the World Bank are killing the people of Mexico.
Well, it's very interesting to note that almost all of the claims of that type are coming from here. They're not coming from Mexico. Right. You will hear protests in Mexico. A lot of those are more directed at the Mexican government, like the south of Mexico, the Chiapas situation, and so forth. Multinationals are mentioned, but certainly the Mexican middle class, including the lower middle class Mexicans, have been big beneficiaries of Mexico. Any policy change is going to create some losers, and somebody's going to lose their job. There's going to be some industries that are disadvantaged. That's true of Mexico. That's true of any country that makes any policy change at all. But by and large, I think it's been a good thing for Mexico. It's building a solid Mexican middle class of managers and technical workers and so forth.
Okay, well, incidentally, we've got a bunch of questions, so let's keep scrolling all those questions tonight, Dawn, including our email. We have a bunch of questions concerning Mexico that'll be up. You can call in on them, 440-3572. Jim Markusen, a professor of economics from CU, is with us. President Fox met with President Bush today. I found it interesting that Fox did half of this speech in Spanish and the other half in English. What's your take on that?
I think his English is quite good. He's quite capable of doing it.
Really good.
Possibly part of that is that he is also speaking to the Mexican audience. And there's, you know, the recession in the U.S., the general slowdown in the U.S. and Europe has adversely affected Mexican manufacturing jobs and other things. So he is a democratically elected politician in Mexico, and he has to worry about his Mexican constituency as much as pleasing the Americans.
Don't you think that, I mean, that's not a little odd? Here's a guy that speaks perfect English. He's a businessman. I mean, I wonder what the American people, my instant take on it was, why is he doing this? Is it, and it's only almost a way to alienate people in America that were like, you're in America, you speak English anyway, speak English.
Well, I mean, most people that address the joint sessions of Congress, he's probably actually unusual. They typically speak in their native language so they don't make a blunder. And in fact, it's somewhat unusual for this to happen. And as I say, he's thinking in his mind that he's talking to both the Americans and the Mexicans at the same time.
All right. You're in favor of NAFTA?
Yes.
And world trade and trade, free trade, and
Yes.
And investment.
Without apologies.
Because if you read the Colorado Daily and you watch, the leftist television programs that appear on this TV station, and sometimes when you talk to students and, they'll say, oh, the World Bank is terrible. Without any rhyme or reason. So, you're one of the first people that I've come across, that's a professor, because I was like, when I talked with our producer, I said, please don't find me a communist economics professor. It'd make me crazy if I have to deal with it. And I have to deal with these people all the time anyways, just calling the show.
Well, a lot of that, again, I don't understand where, I'm frankly a little bit confused from this. If you actually go talk to the people in the developing countries, and you can certainly put China on that list, which is still considered at least nominally communist, if wavering in principle, they are very much in support of joining the world economy, of opening their economy to trade and investment. And the results for China have been dramatic in the last decade. There's been a tremendous growth in per capita income in China. It is not concentrated in the hands of a small number of elites. It's widespread throughout the economies, at least in the urban areas. It will take another decade or two to really permeate throughout China. The results have been terrific. Other places like Taiwan and Korea have enjoyed enormous success by opening their economies, figuring out their niches, doing what they do well. Where some of this stuff is coming from, I don't know. It is not coming from the people in these economies themselves.
I'll tell you where it's coming from. It's coming from the anarchists who want to see the total collapse and destruction of the world, so that the world just has to sort of shuffle down, and then we will rebuild this utopian state in their mind. Personally, I think they've taken too many mushrooms and too much LSD to come up with it. It's that Jefferson Starship syndrome. They're like, it's nuts. But my concern is that here we live in a large university town, and you see people buying this. What kind of students do you have, or do you?
Well, I think we have an image problem in the state of Colorado. A lot of the craziness in Boulder is not coming from the university. It's coming from other people in the city and in the city government. This resolution we had last week in the city council, this completely meaningless gesture about not buying World Bank bonds, that had nothing to do with the university or the university people. You wouldn't have found a single economics professor that supported that resolution.
Not one economics professor.
Not one economics professor.
How many economics professors are there at CU?
We have 27.
27. And are they picked or split politically? In terms of left, socialist?
Yeah, it's pretty middle of the road. There are people that would be considered, and one or two might be considered on the liberal, half of the Democratic Party, and then two that would be considered on the right of the Republican Party. One has been appointed as a tax advisor to Governor Owen. He's a fairly conservative member of the department. But no crazies on either end. I would say that everyone is pretty sensible and has pretty fair discussions and lively debates in their classes.
Well, joining this conversation is Margarette Bohannon, who is also a CU student, and she is our new intern and international affairs producer. So what do you see at CU? In terms of, you're a student of international affairs and I presume economics and other things. Do you see a lot of leftist sort of thought, or do you agree?
I see a little bit leftist thought, but I haven't been in too many economics classes, but I would say generally the economics students would probably, they believe what their teachers are telling them, and their trade, and you learn in economics that trade is good, and trade benefits all countries most of the time. There are losers once in a while, but with Mexico, since NAFTA, they've gained 7% increase in their GNP. And
your field of study is international affairs. So what are you studying, and what are you going to do? What are your interests?
International affairs. That means policy, international relations between countries. I don't really know what I'm going to do. I'm interested in foreign services, probably after school Peace Corps.
I mean, do you see the same thread, though, that people come up with this argument about the World Bank or foreign trade or international trade or investment, that it's evil? I mean, there is a segment, but they make an awful lot of noise, and so then you start to think that all of Boulder is this way. Either one of you, I don't care. I'm trying to shed some light on this, which is why
there is a lively debate, and the students have heard this. I've certainly found my students pretty open-minded. We try to engage in a discussion on that. We try to look at hard data. I mean, you can. You probably grew up in the late 60s with me, where everyone philosophized about everything and no one wanted to look at real numbers. So we go through a lot of numbers. What's the relation between trade openness and investment openness and GNP and so forth?
I was a journalist in the late 60s and the early 70s, and one of the things that I was trained as a newspaper, I worked in London, I worked overseas, right in the heart of all of international everything. And the one thing, that you learn, even though I was a hippie journalist, you still had to look at both sides of an issue. And, I found it very, very hard to side with, a lot of, communist thought, or socialist thought. I mean, I visited and lived in some countries that were dominated by the Soviet Union, and it wasn't a pleasant situation. Also, I mean, well, whatever, I could just go on with this forever. I mean, I see it. I see America as this great and wonderful force that sends, investment and trade around the world and helps.
Well, as I say, I think it's also important for people to understand that a lot of what the anti-globalist protesters are saying is not coming from the people themselves in these countries. I'll give you an example. My son just came back, spent 3.5 months in south of Mexico, first in Chiapas, very interested in the political situation there, and then later in Oaxaca. And living literally, he was even working on local wages of, he was working for 60 cents an hour in Oaxaca. And he came back and he said, Dad, what the people of Mexico really want? They want a color TV and they want a washing machine.
Yeah.
And that's what he said to me when I told him I was going to do this show, and I hope he's listening now. But the people there want to join the world economy. They want many of the same things we do. There is no case that one can make on the basis of real data and looking at the facts that erecting barriers to trade and investment are going to help them. That's only going to make their situation worse.
Let's go to the phones. Rob, hi, you're on the air. Question or comment for either Margaret or James Markusen.
How you doing tonight, Jan?
Good.
First of all, I just wanted to thank you for flipping me off last week. You fucking asshole.
Goodbye. Hang up. All right. There we go. That's your typical, when you hear that stuff, hit that get in her button and we will get rid of them. Well, see, now that's what you get. We get a lot of calls like this on this TV show. So you start to think that every CU student is smoking crack, like this guy. Let's talk more about Mexico. Fox wants to open two things that I know that he's doing. He's developing a minimum wage program there. He is developing a health care program. He has to be very careful so that he's not assassinated, correct?
Probably.
Yeah.
Although that happens to American presidents as well.
Oh, not as many public officials get assassinated here as in Mexico. I mean, it's...
Oh, that's true. On the local level, judges and honest law enforcement people have a problem.
And there's a lot of, well, let's talk about corruption in Mexico and that kind of thing, and some of the problems that they've had to overcome and are overcoming.
I don't know a lot about how widespread corruption is. It's a difficult and slippery concept in many societies. Doing what is to one person doing a favor is to another person corruption. And in all democracies, we have favors exchanged at all levels. Where is the line where something is corrupt? In this country, obviously a direct payment in exchange for a favor is considered corruption. Indirect payments, like getting something for your city or your town, is that corruption? People differ on that.
Who were the two people that you worked with in Mexico that were finance ministers?
Well, two of the people that I worked with were the chief negotiators for NAFTA from Mexico, Jaime Sarapuche and Emilio Blanco. Both were later finance ministers. First Jaime Sara, and then Emilio Blanco.
Talk about that relationship, that what you did with them and what you did there?
Well, a lot of that, I would have to say that they had pretty much made up their minds that they were in favor of NAFTA. It was more helping to craft the political strategy of what were the effects and how could they sell this to the Americans, and both to members of Congress and also constituencies in the U.S., such as clothing workers that might be adversely affected. So we went through lots of stories. I worked a lot on the auto sector, figuring out how did we expect production to change, where were jobs going to be created, where were jobs going to be lost, that kind of things. And they kind of took that information and then worked on the politics. They were very, very effective politicians as well as good economists.
Okay, let's start with some basics. What is NAFTA, and then what are the basic benefits not only to the Mexicans but to Americans? What does NAFTA even stand for? Well, we have a lot of people like the young man who just called it, doesn't have a clue, I'm sure. Right.
NAFTA stands for North American Free Trade Association, and for Mexico, it represented a rather dramatic departure of a number of decades of being relatively isolationist in economic terms, possibly justified by a history of colonialism, but one in which they very much turned inward to try to build a wide range of industries domestically without foreign participation, without trade, and without foreign investment. They began to unilaterally change that in the early 80s when that wasn't working well. And then NAFTA was the completion of what had been already a decade-long process. But basically, free trade and investment lead you to specialize in what you really do well and stop doing what you do badly, what's very costly and difficult for you to do. There's no difference than on a level of individuals. You and I don't try to grow our own food, make our own clothes, build our own cars, build our own houses. We specialize in what we do well, and that's what free trade does.
Now, Microsoft, not Microsoft, but Mickey Motions, or Micro Motions as they're known here in Boulder, opened a plant just across the border in Mexico. They're producing flow meters. Now, the people that work at Micro Motions in Boulder are afraid that they're going to lose jobs because they're going to go to people that will make them for less in Mexico. On the other hand, the communists and the socialists in America are complaining because the people that are making the flow meters in Mexico are being paid substandard wages, so therefore we American corporations are exploiting them. Can you speak to that?
The people that have those jobs in Mexico do not feel exploited. Of course they would like to make more, but those jobs tend to be much better than their next best alternative. We can't judge their wages by our standards. We have to judge their wages by what they would be doing otherwise if they didn't have those jobs.
Starving to death. Do you want to speak to that, Margaret? Go ahead.
Yeah, but then, with NAFTA and everything, one of my questions is that we have about 3 to 4.5 million illegal immigrants in this state. Why do they keep coming across the border if NAFTA is supposed to open up jobs in Mexico?
It's not all done overnight.
Well, it's not all done overnight, but since 1994, and the immigration keeps increasing. And I know Fox wants to do something about that too. It does take time, but in the meantime, we still have so many.
Right. I think the benefits of any of these things are often very uneven and unequal. The biggest beneficiaries in Mexico are probably the middle class, people with basic education and basic technical skills. They've benefited a lot. A lot of the illegal immigration tends to occur at the very bottom of the skill and the education levels, people that are going to be gardeners and farm workers and so forth. And it's going to be a decade or two.
Yeah, this is. Let's go to the phones. John, hi, you're on the air.
Yes, I have some questions here about the things that have never really been broached at your level and, let's say, at the national level. Where does the Catholic Church, the Vatican, come into these sort of negotiations that are going on? Mexico used to have probably the best anti-clerical constitution in the world. That was back, I think, in the days of Cardenas.
Let's stop with that.
Wait a minute, I'm talking to you, Mr. Scott.
No, this is my show, so now you will listen. Now let's get an answer. Put him on mute there, okay? Put him on mute, okay? Just pull his volume down, but don't hang up on him. So let's address the first question that he had.
I don't know if we ever got the question.
Well, it was about the Catholic Church.
The same, in both Mexico and Spain, had a very unfortunate tradition in the sense that the Catholic Church allied itself in revolutionary periods with pretty reactionary forces, landowners, and so forth, very, very far away from what the true tradition of the Catholic Church was. And when, so in the Spanish Civil War, and also in the Mexican Revolution, the Catholic Church tended to be solidly allied with pretty conservative is a mild word, reactionary elements. And that in many ways discredited the church and led to the anti-clerical attitudes in both Spain and Mexico.
Okay, anyways, this guy called up. Do you have any comment on that question? Yeah. But you know, so no, the way the show works is you don't get to come on here and have a soapbox. I have the soapbox. You get to call and ask our guests questions, and then I answer them, and I get to cut you off when I want to. I know it's not fair. It's not intended to be fair. Now, NAFTA, now we have something in place like NAFTA all across the world, right? I mean, with globalization, we're doing a trade and investment across the board. I mean, around the world, we're trying this very same thing, right?
To varying degrees. I mean, I think Latin America was slow to liberalize compared to East Asia and Southeast Asia. South Asia and Africa are still way behind on the liberalization schedule.
And Asia is the area where, that's the area that you're most interested in, right?
Mine's Europe, but I did live in Asia for a while.
And where did you live?
I lived in Thailand and Taiwan. Yeah. And that,
do you see the same things there in those countries that people want? I mean, no, John's gone. He can't be on the show anymore. He was rude. We'll wait for another caller. I mean, do you see that Asian people, you know, want trade, and they like the World Bank, and they want, you know, American investment in those countries?
Yeah, very much. And my roommate actually just got back from China, and they love America, and they've got big markets there, and they need to utilize them and get into the big trade, the globalization, and it would really bring up their income.
What did we do? Did we just open? What were the American stores we just opened in mainland China? Is it McDonald's or what? Something just opened. What is it? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Oh, it was a big story about it in the press.
McDonald's is probably everywhere.
No, we opened the first whatever, and the people are like, oh my God, I wonder how this is going to work out. Oh boy. Okay. Some of the people, the communists, socialists, complain about environmental issues because of globalization, especially in Mexico. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Again, I don't know if they're socialists or communists or not, but I disagree with them. And there's an awful lot of evidence. We've studied this a lot. The enemy of, the enemy of environmental quality is poverty. I think we prove that overwhelmingly by lots of studies and evidence that environmental quality is another economic good. It's something people want after their television and their washing machine. And when people are poor, they don't worry about it. The most severe environmental problems in the world have nothing to do with trade. They have nothing to do with multinational corporations. They have to do with poverty.
The 440-3572, we've got a bunch of circulating questions that are up here. You can call in and ask about those. Jim Markusen is here with us, Professor of Economics from CU. Also, Margarette Bohannon is a International Affairs student at the University of Colorado. One of the things that I keep hearing from the WTO protesters is America and the World Bank are giving money to corrupt governments. Every government is corrupt in every third world country. And not only that, the corporations go in and cut deals with the governments, and the workers, the people, are worse off than they ever were. You know, children are starving and dying in the streets more than ever.
Right.
The problem I'm having is that students in Boulder, and a lot of Boulderites, especially young people, are buying this.
Okay, the World Bank, I have lots of friends who work there, I think very highly of them, is in one of these damned if you do, damned if you don't situations with respect to this. In dealing with a country with corrupt government, if you give them money, you're criticized on the one hand,
right.
And legitimate, you know, that's a fair criticism.
Sure.
On the other hand, if you impose these same groups, a nasty word for them is conditionality. Mm-hmm. Conditionality means that you're only going to give them money or give them money in the future if they fulfill a list of tough reforms. When the World Bank imposes conditionality, often the same people get outraged and criticize the World Bank for beating up on poor, low-income countries. Well, you simply can't have it both ways. Personally, I'm in favor of tough conditionality. I think that ultimately benefits the ordinary people in the country by really squeezing the corrupt elites. It's absolutely true that many of the poorest countries in the world are poor because they have really corrupt and incompetent elites.
Margaret?
Yeah, I agree. And but the thing about what people are arguing about when the communists, you say, that we say that it's bad there, but it could, because of the corrupt people that are taking all the money and everything. The thing is that they're looking at it and saying it could be better. And it's idealism, and they're thinking, you know, we wish it could be better, and that's why, you know, you are saying that we do need conditions on the money that goes in there because there are corrupt.
And I call them communists or socialists or progressives because this whole movement is pushed by this sort of progressive left out of the United States and worldwide. They have a whole, and the anarchist movement, they have a whole other agenda. They could give a crap about the World Bank and NAFTA. That's what they've seized on since nuclear arms can't be the thing that they can seize on anymore for political power.
I'm not going to judge who all is the protest.
Let's go to the phones. Nick, you're on the air.
Actually, this is Rob. I'm back. Hi.
No, goodbye. Hang up on this guy. Okay, 440-3572 is the talk line. We have with us today Jim Markusen, Professor of Economics from CU, and Margarette Bohannon, who is studying international affairs. Let's see. So, a quick course in economics for people to understand this. I don't think a lot of people really understand what economics is. I mean, is there any way, we only got about 3 minutes left, but can you know, it's like, can you shed some light on this fact that money, business, corporations, trade, finance is not in itself evil, and if we weren't doing what we were doing worldwide, we would really have a hell of a mess.
Wow, I don't think I can do that.
In 3 minutes.
I just did it.
Okay. No, it's the study of how you start with basic resources and people's preferences and labor and capital and land and so forth, and how that's organized into production and distribution and consumption. How we get out, eventually we realize outcomes from those primitive factors, and you know, how can we do that better? How does it work, and how can we make that system better?
But Africa would be better off if they were back in the tribal system, living off the land. That's what you hear. I'm not going to even go there. I have a whole wrap. Thank you so much for coming by.
Okay, thank you. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you, Margaret, for being here.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back next. We're gone.